welcome. I know it's right after lunch. We want to make sure that you get a lot out of this. You are very fortunate, as I am, to be accompanied by two people. One of them is my business partner, and one is a partner in the work that we do together, who are really on the cutting edge of the work that we're doing specifically, but also in terms of manifesting Black liberation. And you will get different versions and different twists around how that can be possible. I am a 40-year veteran in finance from Chicago originally. I lived here in Boston and actually was part of the startup of Ujima, and cut my teeth on launching a fund called Boston Impact Initiative, which is here. And Ujima's business model, the fund models, is part of the work that I and another founder developed in the context of a charitable loan fund. And it was one of the first in the country to do, to collect money from non-accredited investors and those who have money or knowledge to be able to make investments per group of government regulations, to be able to invest in a place and to invest with mission first and return second. So that was 2018, 2017. It's now 2023. I'm on my third version of a fund called Potlikker Capital. And Konda and I both are co-founders of that. Some of you heard Konda's fantastic talk this morning, inspired me, even though I know you. Where we are trying to provide reparative capital, it's a double entendre of reparations and repairing communities. And it's a sister fund to Jubilee Justice, which Konda runs.
Can you explain double entendre?
Yes, double entendre is has double meanings.
Right, I know that, but
For other folks. And so it's a heavy question, I'll just answer it. One of the things that we decided to do was to build an institution that did not exist. Despite the heritage of African Americans in this country in ag, there is, until recently, there have not been any finance organizations that were led and run by Black people that funded ag, despite 50% of all Black people still live in the South, still have rural connections. And so Black Farmer Fund, which I'll let you talk about, and Potlikker Capital and Jubilee Justice are all dealing with building institutions. In 2023, think about that. 2023, we now have a couple institutions that are led by Black people to deal with Black ag. It's good and bad. And so I am here really to shepherd a conversation along with some tidbits around Potlikker, but I want you to hear what they have to say too, because it should rock your world to realize I'm not a farmer. I don't even like to put my hands in the dirt. I can't stand the feeling of it. But I do understand systems. Everything I've done the last 20 years has been racial justice, redirecting capital. So we talk about Black possibilities. It was possible for me to have a huge impact. Been running around DC, trying to get stuff in the Farm Bill, talking to philanthropy on both coasts, driving around in the RV, which I am now, in cotton fields and citrus farmers in Florida, the last Black one. I never would have imagined this. We talk about Black possibility. And the good thing is we're here. The bad thing is, what if we weren't? So this conversation is to talk about Black liberation and possibilities and how we all have something, some jewel that our ancestors have given us, left you with, a baton that you're supposed to be passing on. And so these are ways to think about, sort of spur that thinking. So that is my history. I'm going to turn it over to Konda if you want to reintroduce yourself a little bit.
Sure. I'm Konda Mason and the founder of Jubilee Justice. I think most of you may have been in this morning's session. So you've heard enough about that, about me. But when I started Jubilee Justice, I realized that, well, it's obvious, but that black farmers needed capital. That was not extractive. That was of the nature of reparative. And so knowing that and knowing this wonderful brother here, Mark Watson, who has been in my life for, I don't know, about 10 years, and who I always wanted to work with because I talked this morning about integrity being the most important value, and it absolutely is. And why I wanted to work with Mark is because I can close my eyes, I can turn my back, I can do whatever I do, and or even if I pass this world, I will know that Mark is handling things the way that I would with great integrity. And I wanted a partner like that because I've had enough partners without it. And so I knew I wanted to work with Mark. I knew that we needed capital. I know his expertise, going from Wall Street to justice around, and because that is absolutely the opposite, around capital. And his knowledge base was so wide and the breadth of his integrity. And I said, I just turned to him one day and I said, hey, how about we start a fund as a sister organization to Potlikker? And he absolutely said, yes, let's do it. He was doing something else and he had to finish what he was doing and he came along. We named it Potlikker. How many of y'all know about Potlikker? Okay, so Potlikker, I grew up in Southern California with a mother from Texas. And I didn't know that black people didn't know what Potlikker was until I started this organization. I realized, y'all don't know what Potlikker is? I thought everybody did. It is, that when you cook your collard greens or your mustard greens and there's this juice that comes from it. And I grew up with my mother taking that juice and making sure that the children had it because it built strong bones, right? It's like the Jewish people's chicken soup, it's our Potlikker. And so Brian Terry, who is an incredible friend and chef, I had his book on the shelf and I brought it down. I said, I need a word that has meaning, that has to do with food, and Potlikker came out. I said, of course, that's the name of it, Potlikker Capital. And so Potlikker is that kind of capital in our way of moving in the world that is going to strengthen the bones of our communities. And so I'm very happy to tell you that this partnership with Mark, in all these years I've been on the planet, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've had many partners. I've had many businesses. I have never had a partner like this. And I am just deeply grateful for how we are together, how we work together, what our visions are, and how we implement them. So yeah, yes to beautiful partnership and friendship. So,
Konda, thank you for the accolades. We are also fortunate to meet, and I don't know if you want Shaka or Charles.
Shaka.
Shaka.
Please. Yeah.
So Shaka, why don't you introduce while you're sitting here on this day and a little bit about your background. We have similar trajectory, but you have some different twists that I didn't take.
Oh yeah, but I wasn't going to talk about all the twists.
Well, you share what you want to.
Okay, I'll edit it a little bit. So I'm Shaka Wade. Hi everyone. I am from upstate New York, the son of two Black Studies professors, and I'm the investment director at Black Farmer Fund. It's a 501c3 community-led investment fund focused on supporting Black farmers and food entrepreneurs, food actors. So anyone involved in the food space, from agriculture to distribution to farmers markets, catering, restaurants, to retail. We're looking at food tech, and we focused on New York State for our pilot fund, which was 2021. Now we've expanded from Maine down to Pennsylvania, 9 states. Community-led, as I mentioned, so we've got an investment committee that's comprised of 10 folks from various states, and they're all food actors or have some unique experience along with their food experience, like community activism, credit underwriting experience and so forth, but they make the decisions for our fund. Going back to my background and how I got into it, like Mark mentioned, he's got the Wall Street background. I too had a Wall Street background, 20 plus years, and always had the desire though to be close to the land. And so as a child, I grew up on my grandparents' farm in rural Oklahoma, at least summers on my grandparents' farm. My father was from the Mississippi Delta, and as I mentioned, both parents were Black Studies professors, civil rights activists. So my idea was that I would learn stuff and then eventually find a way to help the, my community, my people. Growing up, I had a close friend who was like, hey, you're a sellout for going to Wall Street. But then I said, that's easy for you to say because your people basically run Wall Street and you know everything about it. So I wanted to bring some of that knowledge back to our people. And so part of our work at Black Farmer Fund is spreading education on finance and on how extractive capitalist systems work and how we can change those and improve upon those systems. I mean, this is all out of order, but I just want to mention before I close that Black Farmer Fund was founded by Karen Washington and Olivia Watkins, both farmers who met at a conference and said, we need to do something to support Black ownership in the food system, which has been systematically eroded over time, both by government and private, machinations. And so we support folks with low interest loans, grants, and technical assistance. And maybe we can go into...
Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, we can talk a little bit about that. So low interest loans, a lot of that funding comes from...
Let me just frame it for you.
Oh, okay.
Because the next question that I want to just keep this moving along is, this is about Black liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to be a little controversial. We both worked on Wall Street. I would hardly use the word liberation, at least my experience.
Right.
And so if you can weave your answer to, and Konda, if you can join this, how does your organization now support Black liberation?
Okay.
So you can weave in the type of vehicles that were, tools that you use.
Okay.
But this conversation is about liberation, not necessarily our respective organization. But I want to use that as an example.
Gotcha.
So people can
Okay.
model.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. So when I think of liberation, I think about creating some independence from these structures that have taken away for so long from, from Black folk, from BIPOC folk, and extracted and focused on non-BIPOC folks. And so if you know about investment compounding, you know that over the long amount of time that this has happened, compounding has occurred. So when you try to calculate the amount of value that's been extracted, it's almost impossible. It's mind-blowing. So we need to create systems that make us, where we can operate away from these structures which still persist. And so part of what we do at Black Farmer Fund is we take private capital and direct it towards the businesses and entrepreneurs that we focus with, and we do things like we remove some of the colonial type of features that have been put in place. So we don't do credit reporting unless someone perhaps requests it so that they can build their credit. We typically don't take security interests, meaning we don't say, okay, we're going to take away your tractor, we're going to take away your land if you don't pay on time. There are some exceptions when, if we want to protect someone from other creditors, that we might do that. We do things like work with folks. It's patient capital, so we work with folks if they get behind on their payments. So these are some of the things that we're doing to support the idea of Black liberation. We're creating our own ecosystem. We work with partners such as Potlikker Capital, Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, Boston Ujima, Soulfire Farm, New York City Farm School, and we're creating this ecosystem where people can rely on each other. I'll just mention one more thing that we do. We do community work days, for example, where we have people in our ecosystem converge on a farm or a business to help do whatever they need getting done, raising greenhouses, doing skill shares. We support people with legal support, accounting support. Just the other day, a beverage producer who is a young entrepreneur and has demand from some markets, just didn't have any financial statements. So we got a Black accountant to help put together the financial statements. That's called pre-TA, pre-technical assistance. So before we even invested in them, we supported them with these accounting services. So things like this, that if you go to your bank for a loan, they're not necessarily going to do for you. These are things that we do to support liberation.
Konda, you used the word reparative capital. And we work together with Potlikker. Models are similar because they came from the same place. So we all know each other, and Ujima and BII and Black Farmer. I was also supportive in helping Black Farmer Fund grow. So this is community. This is what we talked about earlier.
That's right.
You're part of this community. You've been at this for a while. What does reparative capital mean, and how does that help liberation, Black liberation?
Yeah. So again, like what Shaka was just saying, the extractive nature of capital. I always wondered, why do poor people stay poor and rich people stay rich? And then I started, and I didn't know the game until I started a business and I needed to get funding. And I saw the nature of the deals. And I was like, oh, this is how it works. And it's very extractive. And so that is a big issue for our communities. And so we often stay out of capitalization and try to do it on our own. And so we stay small, right? Because you do need the capital to grow, because if you get into that system, then you get extracted. So it's like, which is worse? And so I know so many of the entrepreneurs, because I'm with Runway as well. I'm one of the founders of Runway. And literally we have a brother who has a business who literally under his mattress is where he kept his money and did not ever have any investment and needed capital. And so reparative capital is that capital that says, as Jessica always says, I believe in you. We're here to come beside your business. It's more than just capital. The capital is a part of it. But what I have found out is that we think as Black folks, particularly, that what I need is money. When actually, when you boil it down, you need more than that. It's the social capital. It's getting into the circles of the people who, the friends and family stuff that we don't have. That it's that social capital that can help you say, and what we do at Potlikker is we look at the entire ecosystem of an entrepreneur, of a farmer, and say, okay, what you really need is a deal here or this transportation. Oh, I know somebody who has that. And you don't even have to borrow what you think you need. And so that is reparative capital. It's capital in the big sense of looking at the umbrella of capital and understanding it doesn't always mean money. Okay, even though when it does mean money, it comes also at a place that is as friendly and working beside you as possible. The same thing, grants, recoverable grants, very small interest loans, how we do it. And so that absolutely leads to liberation in that, you know, we talk about, again, going back to the idea of possibilities and imagination, and how we have had to, we live in a world where we have limited our imagination based on this notion that this is not out here for us. And so I've got to keep it small. And how do we liberate ourselves from that consciousness, right? And there being institutions that can support a change of mindset and say, we are standing by your side, including Runway. And so I have to say that liberation, Black liberation in our field, I am working with so many farmers, Mark, that they can't believe it because they've been so screwed by so many people that look like me too, okay? And they come up and they say, really? You really are here for me, for us? Like, this is really, and it's about trust. It takes time because they don't trust and they shouldn't. And so we spend a lot of time just relationship building. And so reparative capital is built on relationships. It's built on relationship building and taking the time that it takes instead of coming in with the deal. That is that extractive mentality. Taking our time, meeting you where you are, you being in that RV and showing up on the doorstep right there at the farm, and just having the first and second and third and fourth, and this, oh, they keep coming back. It's not just, oh, he keeps coming back. Him and that funny RV just keeps coming back.
That's true too.
Right?
Right.
And that is reparative capital. That's reparative capital. It's repairing relationship first before you do anything else.
This is just to share a little story, and I'm moderating, but I'm also supposed to be talking about some examples. We have an investment committee, we call it a resource council, similar, that's mostly farmers. Our board are mostly farmers. One of the interesting things that we noted, we're sharing tidbits so you all can go back and come up with your own modifications. We started having meetings, and it was the first time often that none of the farmers were in the position of allocating money to other people. And you know how we all sit back and talk about how you don't realize how deep colonialism is penetrating. And I would hear things and I'm like, I can't believe I heard, but you were realizing people are mimicking how they had been treated.
It's trauma.
Testing the knowledge of the cattle ranch or whatever. And we had to have a little talk.
Yeah.
And so part of this liberation idea is happening externally, but it's happening internally at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I know that just as one of the co-founders,
Yeah.
like we have to liberate ourselves first.
Yeah.
I mean, like our minds are hurt. I know you run into this too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
the
we
same.
talked about this the other day. We need to
Yeah.
liberate ourselves and our people.
Can I say something to that,
Please
Mark?
do.
I just had a conversation with a mock outside, and it's like, I'm looking at the leadership right now in this ecosystem that we are in, and so many are here today, and it's like this is like a wonderful reunion, and we're commiserating about how hard it is to do for our own people because the trauma that we have inherited that has come through all of the different reasons that it has, we bring that same response, that response that is just like coming hard at ourselves, at our people who are now in positions to help, the same that we do to the people who have created the problem. We have to have a different way of coming into community because it's just not working. And so we are beating each other down. And like you said, the liberation really starts inside. If we don't liberate our mindset and understand and see what has been created is legitimate, all these things have happened historically and personally, and have that where it belongs, deal with it where it belongs, and to come into spaces when you're talking to Potlikker, you're talking to Black Farmers Fund, you're talking to Katali, you're talking to all these people who are genuinely all about helping our people, and being torn down, because of the trauma that we're bringing into this space. We got to do our work, y'all. We got to do our work, because people are tired. These leaders, I'm talking about right now, starting a retreat at the farm where we just come together and have some time together and understand where the breakdowns are and how we're feeling, and replenish ourselves, because it's really hard work. It's really hard work. And so it's really incumbent upon us as Black folk to really look at our trauma, look at it, deal with it in places, and do the kind of healing that needs to take place, and not have people who are here to help you be the victim of the trauma that you're holding. Or else it's not going to happen.
I appreciate this focus on healing programs. We all run organizations. Shaka, there's certainly the work you do for farmers, but what have you asked the folks at Black Farmer Fund to do? I gave you examples of colonial behavior that we don't all consciously realize we're doing.
Right.
What things do you have in your organization where you're asking people to set that aside, or that doesn't belong here? Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, I mean, part of it you kind of talk to when you're talking about how hard we can be on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the core part of it right there, is that because there's been this, decades and centuries of trauma, it's the only way that we know how to interact in some cases. So, we try to tell people to give people second chances, get to know people. It's the relationship component. Get to know people and understand where they're coming from, versus just looking at statistics and numbers and things like that. Because, once you start doing the work and getting to know someone and talking to someone and seeing how they work and what their goals are and what they're doing, then you might be able to find another solution. So it's kind of about putting in the work and having the flexibility and the creativity to meet people where they're at, versus just coming with some cookie cutter solution and saying, well, you look like this entity, so we're going to do it this way just because we did it this way with the other entity, and cutting corners and things like that. It has to be a customized approach with flexibility, and you have to put in the work and keep the relationships going.
Yeah.
But you all have something unique. You put out a press release in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having one CEO, you now have two.
Oh, right, yes. So
what does that have to do with Black liberation?
this is the shared leadership structure that we have. So rather than just having, one founder at the top running the show, we have a leadership structure of two people who they bring different strengths, and they have different perspectives, and they share the power in the organization, meaning, and not just among themselves, but with everyone else. But this way we have more, I want to call it checks and balances, but you do have people who can step in and work with each other, versus having it all be on a single person's shoulders. So just the same way the investment committee is the one that makes all the decisions, we have shared power at the leadership structure as well. So.
Konda, word is that you have a rice mill.
Yeah.
And my understanding, I'm on the board too, but this is Konda's creation, that will be the only Black cooperatively owned rice mill in the state of Louisiana. You refer. Tell us.
And solar powered.
And solar power. Tell us more about, and again, this is about Black liberation, and how your
Yeah.
organizations are either moving differently through the world
Yeah.
than otherwise. And can you share
Yeah.
what your intentions about that project,
Yeah.
how it came about, why it came about, what's
Yeah.
the connection to Black liberation?
Yeah, one of the things, getting into this ag sector, one of the things when you look at it is pretty clear where we are on the spectrum of all the different trajectories of possible careers and what we do from producers to, you name it, farmers, whether it's retail or what have you. One of the things that is absolutely missing by and large, I mean, there's a few, is that place where the manufacturing happens, that place that takes a crop to the next level so that it now can be sold. And so because we don't own those spaces, we don't own the means of production of those spaces, what happens is that as a farmer, if I'm growing sugarcane, I am relying upon the cane factory to mill to take my crop. And one of the ways that they are systematically, as you said, it is government, it is private sector, it is banks, how Black land is being completely confiscated from 18 to 20 million acres that we had in the 1920s down to less than 1 million today. It's not because we're bad farmers. We're the one who farmed this whole wheat. If it weren't for us, nobody would have eaten back in the day, right? We are the farmers. It's because it has been systematically taken. And so that is a big problem. And what I have found is that if you are growing a crop and your whole world in that year is this particular crop, and you have a contract with someone, with the next entity that is going to take your crop and take it to the next level, and then they renege. Now it's time for the crop to come out of the field. You got to harvest. Harvest has a window. You got to harvest, and now you have no place for your crop to go. That is an intentional ploy. So now you've lost a whole year. And you are one every year, you can't survive that. You can't survive that. So that is a systematic way of Black folks losing out and land being taken. And they're over collateralized, so they also lose their land, they usually lose their homes, they lose all of their equipment. I mean, it's devastating. Mm-hmm. And so I said, rice mill is the next step between rice and the public. Those people need to be replaced by us. And so I immediately said, we got to build a rice mill. And that self-determination, nobody can take that from them ever. No one can take that from them. And it's paid for. Complete, there's no debt. It was all built through philanthropy. It's a full-on rice mill. It is ready to go. We have rice coming out of the field in 2 weeks. And for the first time, we're going to sell our rice and own it, a total vertical integration from the seed to marketing to distribution. And that does not exist anywhere. And it's a cooperative. And so that whole intentional stack, that is the stack that we created so that there is complete self-determination and liberation from anybody who can do anything to you and take away your crop.
I mean, I'm just trying to showcase that obviously I know both folks well enough. I'm trying to show examples of building portals to liberation in traditional models. We got people in the audience. I used to live in Roxbury. We got a grocery store selling Black products sitting in the back. I mean, people are pushing the envelope. You need to vertically integrate. I'll give a little story about Potlikker. One of the things two things that we're doing, we're talking to farmers, and Potlikker is national and is BIPOC, but a heavy emphasis on Black. And one of the things we kept hearing, and I know you hear this too, is we were asking, because there's a contract around being as focused on social as you are on climate justice, because we get impacted more you know about the hurricanes. We're in coastal areas, the worst land. It affects us more than most people. So we need to be leaders in resolving that. But the point that I'm trying to make is, we kept asking people, you got to change your farming practices, like Konda just talked about. And they would say, we can barely stay in business as it is. And that is going to require different equipment that we do not have. So we got together and we talked about Konda. We need an equipment trust. Got on the computer. Where do they have? Somebody must, I called it, I'm from Chicago. We need an equipment library. That's not the word. We need an equipment trust. In West Africa, do you know you can order a tractor like a Uber, they deliver it, you use it on your land, and it goes back on the tractor. They share in cooperatives. They do this in Pueblo, indigenous people do this as well. We don't have that here, and there are reasons why we don't have that here, but black people need to have that. So we created the first national BIPOC equipment trust, which we launched in May in DC. So we got 11 states talking on the video. Half men, half women. We are the world rainbow tribe. It is not easy, but that's what I'm talking about, building liberation, control of their destiny, without debt on their balance sheet, to your point earlier, which we got to get some people in New York involved. But those are ideas. So again, we're taking a traditional, yes, a farm loan, but you all are doing customized financings. You're connecting producers to retailers from New York City to upstate New York. That is intelligence, I think. I really applaud you all in doing that. Let me ask you, this whole liberation idea, what has been the reception? And we're all talking about the positive things. What has been the reception of your work to the ecosystem? As you raise your hand as Jubilee Justice or Potlikker or other things that you do, your work on the journeys. I mean, I think you should talk about that. And I want, in addition to Black Farmer Fund, you've done other things. What has been the reception of the ecosystem to your pushing back as a liberationist? This was not in the schedule, so you got to think about it.
And so you mean the greater ecosystem outside of the folks
are
we're
you being
trying
rewarded?
to work with?
People welcoming you? Are you getting pushback? Well, what does that feel like?
People who haven't thought about liberation or worked towards liberation in the past are shocked at how we do things sometimes. For example, in our fund structure, the senior most and therefore safest investment piece is targeted for individuals who are not necessarily high net worth and who aren't professional investors, so that they can build wealth. And so it offers the highest yield or the highest interest rate. So we've basically flipped things, because in the extractive capital markets, the piece that yields the most is typically the least safest. So we want to protect individuals who are trying to build wealth, who have shared experiences in the communities we serve and everything. And so that's one thing where when people in the ecosystem see that, how we're flipping traditional capitalism in that way, they are very skeptical, they're shocked, they question it. But then on the other hand, you have great supporters who, are eager to provide the kind of capital that is patient, like grant funding. Recoverable and non-recoverable grants are super helpful, and so you have a mix of reactions, and from people who find it upsetting even and shocking to see, because if you think about it, there's some people who just were never aware of a lot of this history, right? Some people out there in the world just never had the motivation to understand the real history behind the liberation movement or the chattel slavery or Jim Crow. None of that. I've known educated people who just, they're like, well, slavery ended, a long time ago. Like, what? What's the problem? And it's not that they're trying to be obnoxious, they just don't know. And so you have people like that in the ecosystem who need to be educated. And so a big part of the work that all of us do is educating people in the ecosystem.
I will lean in. I'm going to turn it over to you, but I want to say that. So, why does a Chicago boy who ate out of the Jolly Green Giant bag, and both my parents worked, so we didn't have time to grow anything. I knew nothing about agriculture. Why did I, when Konda called me, why did I take that call and say yes? I got on my computer again. My mother was good at research too. And I was shocked that we were only 1.3, 1.4% of the farmers in this country were black principals. And I kept thinking, this country is getting browner and browner.
Right.
And my father and I went to visit Joburg and met Nelson Mandela. And I'm touring South Africa. I went to Soweto, and we have our Black Power. And then I was thinking about this, that flashback, I thought, this is the same thing. We have no real assets in the production of the bottom of Maslow's pyramid of food. We cannot even direct the food into our own. We don't produce it, we don't process it, we just consume what they feed us like pigs.
Yep.
And I thought, we have got, before the last 1.4 go away, we got to do something, because we will have no political voice in DC, no pushback other than consumption dollars. But what else are you going to eat if you can't produce it? So my involvement, I'm being colloquial, but to be more formal, the reason why I got involved is this is a political movement for me. Mm-hmm. This is Black liberation too. That's the reason why I joined you in this. If we lose our voice in the production of food, that is a dangerous position to be in as a community.
That's right.
So our work together is certainly preserving and growing the land, but we're about agribusiness, black agri-producers, transportation. We're trying to start an agroforestry company. We got some sisters in the South. We tried a little pilot with a white-owned, which I'm on the board of. Thinking kumbaya, they're gonna help black folks, put these fast-growing hardwoods on their land, and we're gonna sell them to IKEA, wherever else. They didn't know how to talk to our people. Because they had an approval process, denying. Now I got all this like bad blood or whatever, and I have harmed people. I've not helped them. So what do? We are trying to figure out a way. We found this group of sisters, formerly incarcerated, all over the South. They know everybody. They got their land. They re-entered. They're driving 18-wheelers. We'll do it. We will water these trees. We will dig these trees. Do you realize how powerful that is? They meet regularly anyway. That's what I'm talking about, liberation. Potlikker is doing that. No bank is going to do that.
Right.
Wow.
So tell me
love
about
that.
Jubilee.
I love that story. And the liberation that we need comes, again, going back to the theme of this conference. It is about our greatest imaginations. Our imaginations have been stilted to think we cannot do what we can't do. It's always what I can't do. And if we can take that off and really go with our wildest dreams and have the kind of community that is going to support that dream, we have to continue dreaming, y'all. That's the only reason why we're here, because somebody before us dreamed us. They dreamed that we would actually be here one day. How did they dream that, given the circumstances of chattel slavery? But they dreamed us up. And so we have to do the same, and we've got to be the ancestors, okay? It's not just about us. We got to be the ancestors for the future generations to come. What are we doing to pave that way if we don't dream big and go for big? And failure is a part of it. Like, what you just said, I love that you just said, I harmed some people. Yeah, that's going to happen when you really put yourself out and you just say, I'm going for broke. I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to fail somewhere. But that is liberating too. Instead of taking that and saying, oh, I shouldn't do it. And that, like black folks got this much room. White people can fail and all day long and reinvent themselves and all that. But we just can't. We have this little space. And so we have to change that. We really have to change that mindset and that understanding of ourselves. And so it really begins with this equipment trust. It's like, it's obvious that's what we need. It's obvious, but it's like, but then we didn't have that mindset to say, oh no, we can't do that. That filter comes in and lets us know what we cannot do. It's noticing that filter and letting that. You got to do your homework. You got to be badass. You got to do the work, and you got to dream, and make it happen. And that is what I mean for me when I think about Jubilee Justice and the liberation that and within my team. It starts with my team because you can't be out there doing all these wonderful things and then your internal home is dirty. And so for me, I work with almost all young people. Mark and I
We're
talk
of a
about
certain
this.
age.
We talk about this is our last hurrah. Okay, after this I'm something else, retiring, stopping, all this because I worked my ass off and I'm too old for this. But what we want to do, so I work with all young people, and I am constantly my entire time I spend, whether we are in the soil and we're weeding or planting. We're constantly talking about that internal person that we are. Who are you? What do you do? And massaging that and growing that. I feel like we are not just growing food, we are growing humanity. And if we are not growing humanity, then we're not going to get to where we need to get to. And food is just a conduit for growing our humanity. And that is what the time that I spent with the young people that I work with, who I just adore. Absolutely adore. They are amazing, and I am so hopeful for the future because I see them. I'm working with them every day, and so that's kind of what the liberation is, an internal one. It has to happen internally.
I wanted, I'm going to turn it back over, and where are we on time? We got 10 minutes? Because we need to take questions from you all, but I wanted to share something that I have come to realize after 40 plus years. I have helped one of the first black women to have a mutual fund. I have designed social impact, aging in place. I'm just to give you a little history. All in this quest of redirecting capital, trying to find places for us to influence. One of the things that's really difficult is to be in that place where I know both of you have been, where you are a little bit old world and a little bit new world, and you're trying to figure out what to leave behind and what to grab onto. And Ujima and Black Farmer Fund and Jubilee Justice and Potlikker, you all have to figure out where you sit in that ecosystem. Mm-hmm. One of the things I think that black people need to do is we don't have the liberty to have the finance people over here and the activist people over here. We need to be in the same room. Activist people, what do we need to solve? Then the finance people run over and work together with, this is how you do it. This is how you implement. This is how you get well-being, health care. Right. This is how you get prenatal care at XYZ. Right? We need to come together, and that is I will just say, as part of black liberation, both sides can be suspect. Yeah. Well, you don't know what capital asset pricing model is. You don't understand risk. Or, our people are dying, they're being jailed or whatever. What you're talking about is the man. We need some new tool to get rid of that capitalism. And I'm not saying I'm capitalist, I'm just saying I'm working with what I got. But I mean, we don't have the liberty to fall into ideological camps. We need to be in one camp. Black liberation.
There you go.
One camp. So I shared that. That's why I'm off my soapbox. But I wanted to open up. We got 10 minutes. You all can ask whatever questions that we're willing to answer. But so I don't know if you wouldn't mind helping us moderate with the.
Hello. My name is Sol, and I want to first just say that I'm impressed. Just to hear what you're doing, I want to just applaud you in the work. And you answered a number of my questions, like I'm asking myself about why farmers, right? When farming is such one of those industries that's under stress, right? And there's been such a tremendous loss of land amongst black people in the US. And you mentioned about having that influence in terms of agribusiness and food and things like that, so that's great. So here are my questions. One is, what are you doing to recover some of the land that has been lost, right? Does your work involve restoring, the land and bringing more opportunity for land farming? And then also understanding that, that's another capital problem. Hydroponics, like how are you bringing in different forms of farming or this kind of business that doesn't require as much land use, right? And then finally, I think it goes to the young people, because I was really interested in how you build a new generation of farmers, considering, again, I think you said 1.3% of farmers are black. And so that needs to, I feel like this needs to grow. That's where I'm situating.
You got a lot of questions in there. We could talk for 3 hours. But why don't you all choose what you want to answer? And I can answer a couple of those too. You, Shaka, you want?
I could start with the first one. So, but it's specific to. I could answer specifically to black farmer fund.
Whatever you.
So
she asked the question.
Okay, so from our perspective, we don't take ownership of land, but I'd say the number one issue that our farmers face is land access. And so we support them. We have partners as well, and we will do things like come up with a down payment or something like that. But to straight up buy a piece of land, it's not likely that we'll do that. But we do have, like I said, we have ways of supporting that. What we find is, farmers leasing land will be, obviously subject to the landowner's whims, and so we'll have people lose a whole season of crops because the farmer didn't allow them to have a cold storage facility on, 100 acres where no one would see it anyway. It would be fine, but they just didn't want to allow that, for reasons that we can only imagine. And so that's a big part of liberation, is getting people access to land. And so we'll team up with people to make it happen. We will find ways of getting people into leases where you can trust the landowner versus, strangers. If you have people going to some, rural area where there's no, people don't want them there in the first place, then they're going to have issues. So we'll deploy legal teams to help people, and we've gone down to DC to try to affect policy. And so these are some of the ways that we work on, actually getting liberation and autonomy as far as land is concerned. But the thing is, land, apparently that's the component of farming that over the years has the most wealth returns, right? Like the actual land itself. And so us not having that ownership causes great harm, and so we definitely want to work to improve that.
Thank you. Konda, you pick your question.
Yeah, I can't remember them all, but I can say that one of the things that we do with Jubilee Justice specifically, we are not working on the issue of more land. We are working on the issue of stopping the bleeding of the land that the farmers currently have. 30,000 acres a year are being lost. Can we stop that bleeding? So that's our path. other people are doing that. And so when we find people, just yesterday it happened, where there was a white family that is looking to get rid of their land now and wanted to go to a BIPOC, and we know who to hook up, and so all of that is there's people who are doing that. Ours is to stop the bleeding, and so this interesting when 98% of all private land in America is owned by white people, 98% of all private land. So that's a problem. And there's a lot of different, in the ecosystem, there are people who are working on that. And again, it's going to continue to go over there as we lose it. It's not just sitting there, it's going to white folk. And so we got to stop the bleeding, and that's what our thrust is.
I would just weigh in. So there are groups doing land back, trying to get young people. I'm trying to hit all your questions. Totally with that. The 5 million acres, I said this in another meeting, that we still own, 80% has row crop and livestock.
Right.
What about those families? I'm getting in an RV after this talk, driving down to Alabama and then to Florida for the last black citrus grower in the state of Florida. The last one. 6th generation family. They have 700 acres. They're an hour from Orlando. 2 minutes. Story. Here's a lesson that you might not have thought about. They own their land outright. They have had to have relatives pass. They've had to pull out the gun. I'm telling you, all those movies we watch, they have done it. Those are real. They are being surrounded by developers. What does that mean? The land is being repriced at development levels, returns, not agriculture returns. So you can own all your land sitting there, and each year it gets more expensive. Taxes, all. So your margins are going down. Eventually you're going to sell out. Unless there's somebody like Potlikker or Black Farmer Fund or whoever who comes out and looks at that business holistically and says, who's the next generation? We got to give them hope. You need to move up. Sell your own juice. You don't need to sell that to XYZ. Make it. You're sitting next to Disney World. It's an hour drive. What about selling and distributing your own juice? You get 6 times the value per orange than if you give it to XYZ. That's what we're working on. I'm just saying, so these are, talk about black liberation. This is real, you all. If they go, no black orange grow in the state of Florida, that's it. At the margin. So it is really this, you got to use all your marbles, all the spirits. I sometimes come back from these trips crying because I feel the ancestral pain. And then I see the fright of the parents trying to hand this. Would you want to hand your kids? You sitting in the middle of Mississippi and hurricanes and the farmer, you can't get a loan and no crop. Is that a gift or is that a... under Black Farmer, that only goes so long. So this is real work. We're talking about ag, but this is true in every other sector. There's one question there.
We are just at time, so if you could keep it a little brief and talk a little bit more after as well.
There were 2 questions. I'm going to pass.
I wanted to first speak to how much the fact that you own a rice mill actually meant to me, because it reminded me of in middle school where they have that school project where they say, hey, bring in something that shows your family history. And having gone through all of primary and secondary school in mostly white spaces, that was a difficult project for me because we don't know our family history. Right? And I remember having so much shame around that when my classmates brought in their family crest and their family patterns of clothing from England and Scotland and everywhere else. And I talked to my family like, what is our history? What is our history? So I can bring in something. And what I ended up bringing in was something that I drew, which was a picture of rice, of a bag of rice. And that was because on my father's side, we came from a small coastal community in North Carolina where our entire family worked in the rice plantations and in rice mills later on.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I was in college at Spelman that I actually got to talk with some of my classmates about that and find out they had this similar experience in middle school. Like, yeah, we all shared that same shame. And I wanted to turn that into, I wanted to change that into a place of pride. Yeah. And as we dug into our ancestry, I found that we were actually Gullah, which I didn't know anything about. And I knew that my aunts, they spoke a little differently, and I'd ask my dad, why do they speak that way? Do they have an accent? Yeah. And this is my brother here. And come to find out, it actually had cultural relevance, and we were Gullah. And as I learned more about Gullah history, I found that we weren't brought over to the North Carolina coast because we were ignorant or easy to capture, but because Africans understood how to cultivate rice and how to work in coastal areas.
That's right.
And that's something that the Europeans didn't know.
That's right.
So we were brought because of our knowledge, not because of our ignorance.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
I say that to say it meant so much to me, one, that you own a rice mill and that it's a cooperative. That brings great pride to me. And that also led us to found what's called the Black Shores Project, where we are capturing the history of Black families in waterfront communities, like our Gullah family, as well as the historically Black beach community that my brother and I grew up in Maryland. And in that, in capturing those stories, we've begun to study the role that cultural placekeeping, preserving that culture, actually plays in the development and maintenance of generational wealth in the Black community. Right. So my question is, in the work that you all do, what role does preserving and keeping that history play?
Yeah, thank you. That's really so
Yeah,
beautiful.
fantastic
Thank you for
story.
everything.
Thank
So
you.
interesting because, you know, I did my African ancestry just not too long ago after I was in this business. And on my maternal side, I'm from Sierra Leone, 100% Sierra Leone, rice farmer, Gullah. And I had no idea until recently. And it's like, of course I'm doing rice. So that is it's just been amazing to discover that. So we're probably cousins, first of all. I just want to say, and I love that because I love this brother, and I'd love to be your cousin, for real, for real. Yeah, the cultural legacy part. We have one of our farmers in South Carolina, one of our founding members of creating Jubilee Justice is a brother by the name of Chef B.J. Dennis. Chef B.J. Dennis is from South Carolina, from Charleston, and he has the whole history, as well as another one of our farmers is coming to join us next week and is a chef. His name is Matthew Rayford, and he's Gullah. And what we do is that we come together, we're coming together as a group in 2 weeks from now, and we go through the history before we eat anything and tell the history of the food. And so the history is absolutely interwoven in everything we do. Thank you for that. Yeah, beautiful.
That was perfect. But you want to make a response?
Oh, no.
She asked. Culture.
Oh, no, I can't. I'm just overwhelmed with emotion because the first time I found out about your folks was my sister was moving from apartment to apartment in Harlem, and I helped and my brother helped, and there was a gentleman there. And you know, you ever been close to someone who looked so good you felt insecure? So that's how I felt with this young man. And I was like, what's his story? I asked my sister, and she was like, oh, he's Gullah. And I had never, I had heard, I didn't know much, but it turns out my mother, who was a researcher, Black Studies professor, that was one of her areas of expertise too. So she used to go down to South Carolina and maybe Georgia, but and she wrote a book about the foremost scholar of Gullah history, And so, and I've subsequently taken a trip down there, and it's become a very important area of study for me now. And so, thank you for your legacy, and for you as well. Yeah, that's all.
We
I'd
will
say.
close. I'll just leave you with this. I'm not Gullah as far as I know, but I have, because
But you're from
I visit
Louisiana.
Konda, because we work together in the rice mill, probably every other month or so. And my family's from Louisiana, and I knew that we were there, but the folks in the north, for shame and all the reasons we talked about, like there was a division. So I was sitting on, just a quick story, and then we'll end. I'm coming down here, I'm helping these farmers and all this, and I don't know who my people are. That's a shame. I did feel bad. So I'm in an Uber in New Orleans, and I don't know what, something came over me to say, do you know my mother's maiden name was Jones? I'm just going to ask this cab driver, this Uber driver, does he know the Joneses? Where do they live? In the whole state. Don't you know his last name was Jones? So he said, I'm a Jones, but there's two Jones, and you're not part of my Jones. But I do know who your Jones people are. And so I say that because here I am out here, freedom rider, we got to, and here I am, my ancestors are saving me. So I have found the other Joneses. They're in Louisiana. And the moral of this whole conversation is our past is liberating us for the future.
Yes.
So I want to thank all of you all. Thank you for the guest stars here. We all bring what we bring to the table, but you all have the most to bring to the table.
Yeah.
Please pass the baton for Black liberation. Thank you.
Yes.